couple of weeks ago I signed up to BBC Maestro. It's their series of online courses, mainly by celebrities, talking about what they're experts in their field at and instructing you on that subject. It was half price or something, it was about 70 quid, and there were quite a few different things on there that interested me. There's a few music ones which obviously interested me, but there's some nerdly enough, there's some cookery ones, there were some graphic design ones, there's Billy Connolly on comedy, there was all kinds of things I was actually interested in, so I thought, well, for 70 quid for the whole year to access to all the courses, I'm going to sign up. Now so far the first one I watched was Billy Connolly on comedy, just because anything that Billy Connolly does is good, and that was very funny. I watched Paula Scher, I think that's how you say it. She's a graphic designer, she's done loads of album covers, she's done Microsoft logos, all kinds of things, so a kind of leading expert on graphic design. And then once I finished watching those I thought, I better actually watch one of the music ones. So the first one I watched was the Mark Ronson on music production. Now it's very different when you're watching these kind of courses when it's on a subject that you know something about. I'd like to think that I do know a bit about music production, being that I do it quite often. And I have to say, I sort of entered this quite sceptically, because I'm always a bit sceptical about these kind of music producers who appear as credited as an artist as well on the music, because I really, through ignorance, like a lot of these kind of prejudices, I didn't really know what they did. So I have to say I was a little bit sort of sceptical before I started, but that was soon kind of put to bed. So I suspected that the course was probably aimed at people with less experience in music production than me. And as I say, when you're watching something that you know quite a lot about, it's a very different thing to watching something that you know nothing about, like the graphic design one. I know nothing about that really. I mean, I've designed one of my CD sleeves, where is it? That one. And things like that, but I don't really know anything about it. I was kind of flailing around in the dark with that. Despite what I say about being sceptical about these producers who are also artists, he's done lots of stuff which has become kind of classic. The stuff that he did with Amy Winehouse, that's ended up in the kind of cover band, function band, wedding band canon. It's stuff that we play all the time, particularly Valerie. I mean, I've probably played that song more than any other song. And, well, one of his other ones, Uptown Funk as well. And he's got to be doing something right if they enter that canon of these classic songs, because quite a few new songs happen. We start playing them in cover bands and they get forgotten. But there's several that just stick, and lots of his stick. Not so much the other Amy Winehouse ones. I've played a lot of them, but the two that have always stuck is Uptown Funk and Valerie. Also, having seen him being interviewed before, he seems sort of a little dour, I suppose. He's kind of, but now I've watched this, I realise he's just sort of very laid back. He sort of drool. He doesn't get excited and stuff, but that's just his manner. He's very sharp actually, though he doesn't sort of come across it instantly. And the other thing, because I googled him before I started, is I discovered that he's from a quite privileged background. His stepdad was in Foreigner, and his family was one of the richest in America at one point. Not anymore, I don't think, and it's kind of, it's never such a compelling story as somebody who's sort of come from nothing. But that shouldn't sort of mean you underestimate his talent, because I'm sure there's lots of people who've, with privilege and opportunity, who have been given the tools to produce records and not done anything like as good as Mark Ronson. So for him to be around for as long as he has and has as much success, there's got to be something in that. So the course starts and he's doing something that I'm completely unfamiliar with. This really, I was so ignorant of it. He's talking about using an Akai sampler, and I didn't even really know what one of these was. I had to look it up, and now because I was so inspired by this, I've kind of gone down rabbit holes on this and been looking at what I could get to kind of replicate this. But he starts off by capturing samples off vinyl onto his Akai sampler. It's an I've written it down, MPC 3000. That's how much I know about this. So it's a totally different way of making music to what I'm used to. And he's capturing little bits of music and then cutting them up, and he's doing it all on this hardware unit. Probably a vintage one, because I don't think they make them anymore. And he's obviously spent hours and hours on this thing, because he's whizzing through the little buttons and the wheels and stuff, something that you could probably do much more easily on the computer, but he's so used to doing it. And as I've looked into this, it has a certain sound, this unit, the kind of AD converters or something. It has a kind of vintage sound that people like, and even listening to him doing it, it did have a sound. I thought, oh, that's nice, there's something warm about that. So he shows how he captures these samples, and then he starts putting together this kind of sample based music using these one hits. He puts the drum parts together first, and then he's sort of playing them on the pads, and then he might get a little musical idea. And it was really inspiring. I have played with sample packs and stuff, but I tend to sort of grab loops and sort of play over those. But this wasn't loops. He was creating getting little one hit things and then putting together a loop essentially from these bits that he captured himself off the vinyl. And I didn't know that you could buy these sample packs on vinyls for this purpose. I'd only ever sort of seen them as digital files and stuff. I'd get them and I'd put them into my sequencer, but he's putting them onto this unit, capturing these bits, and even, you know, he'd accidentally sort of whiz the record round and capture that, and that became part of the sounds that he was creating. And then so as well as this commercial sample pack, this royalty-free sample pack that he used, he then started sampling bits from one of his own records just to show how you could put something together from scratch. And then he deconstructed one of the songs that he produced that was quite a big hit, using the original samples, and showed how he put it all together and how, you know, the artist came to him with a melody and he put this sample based thing underneath it. Really interesting. Then after that he started demonstrating the use of different kinds of instruments and stuff, which was much more in my wheelhouse, as they'd say. And it's strange because he's no great musician by his own admission. You know, he can get round some guitar chords, he can play a little bit of piano, a bit of bass, probably a bit of drums, but he's sort of no musician as such. And he's not claiming to be. He says himself he's no great player, and he sort of makes the odd mistake when he's playing, but that's not the point. So even with the guitar, he's picking sounds and stuff that wouldn't necessarily occur to me to use, but he's listening from a producer's standpoint, and he's, in this bit of the course, he's talking about how it's all about serving the song, and it's dead right. Then he sits down on this upright piano, which he's had for years, at which point when he says, you know, I've had this piano shipped from the UK to the States several times, I'm thinking, yeah, that's somebody with money, because I bet it costs a lot of money to ship an upright piano from the States to England. Anyway, he sits down and plays it, he plays the chords, and it just sounds like the piano that was played on the Amy Winehouse records. I'm not going to go over this whole course, every little bit he does, but I'm going to go over sort of the main bits. And the next section was he got a drummer into the studio and the engineer that he often uses, and they mic up the drum kit in lots of different ways, and they process it in lots of different ways, which is really interesting, because I've kind of messed around miking up drums and stuff. So, you know, he's talking about how he started off just being a sample based musician, then he moved on to proper instruments, and that's a big part of it, using real drums and stuff. And he shows it miking it up with one mic, then multiple mics, and then different ways of processing it with different reverbs, and really interesting. Everything he did sounded really good. It was a really good sound. I mean, admittedly, you know, he had the best mics in the world, but it was to do with his ears. It's the way he's doing it, and he knows what he's doing. Then he shows us, and this might have been the bit where he played that original piano, he gets the original stems out of Back to Black. Is it Back to Black or Back It? I always muddle up those ones. It is Back to Black, isn't it, the Amy Winehouse song? Try not to muddle it up with the AC/DC song. And he shows us even bits that you'd never heard before, Amy Winehouse's original guitar part, her original guide vocal, and then shows how he put the track together underneath what she had, and talks about what she came to the studio with, the sound that she was after, and the process he went through to arrive at that sound. And the funny thing is, when he's playing it, it's like, that has become iconic, that sound. He played the first chords on that piano and you go, I know what that song is. So to reach that sort of level of identity, it is a classic, isn't it? Then perhaps my favourite bit of the whole course was he puts together a session with a singer, rapper, producer who he's never worked with before, called Jon Bellion. And it was important that they never worked together before, because he wanted to sort of show how a producer can set up a session, make someone he's not familiar with seem comfortable. And when this Jon Bellion came in, he was kind of, it wasn't awkward, because it's funny, coming from a sort of British standpoint, we're much more reserved with things like this, because this is something that seems to me, I might be wrong, but with Americans, they're much more open and immediately more friendly with each other. They're not reserved at all, and they just sort of started talking, and you know, that Jon Bellion was immediately opening up about stuff, and Mark Ronson was setting up this session to make John feel as happy as he could for them to sort of start putting this track together. So basically Mark puts together this sort of 4-bar loop, and then Jon Bellion starts kind of singing over it, and he's leaping around the studio, and at first you're thinking, oh, this guy's a bit confident, a bit annoying, he's not holding back at all. And then after a while you think, well, I thought, I wish I had a bit more of that. He's just completely open, he's just going with the flow, he's completely in the moment, not holding back whatsoever. Then it becomes very quickly apparent that this John Bellin is a fantastic singer, and he's obviously got a great ear for melodies, picking these things out, and Mark's sort of capturing all these things, and they start sort of this dialogue about, oh, I like that bit you did there, let's work on that, let's develop that. And they go through this whole process where he comes up with these different ideas. He then goes away and writes some lyrics, and then they put this track together from what they've started. You see them writing the whole thing kind of almost in real time. They then, just to, I guess, show as part of the process, because he's an amazing singer and he's put down this great vocal, they get in a female vocalist, this amazing vocalist, what's her name? Niall Norwood, who's done loads of stuff, and she's worked with Mark before. And she's just a phenomenal singer. And she comes in, re-sings it, and also does these amazing sort of stacked up background harmonies. So they show all this part of the process, then the artists go away, the artist and singer go away, and then Mark starts putting together the track. He comps the vocal, he comps those backing vocals that she's done, then he starts adding little production things, and it was just great watching his kind of process. He then goes on to add some guitar, which, as I say, again, you know, because he's not a guitarist as such, he's kind of approaching it very much from a song, and it's really interesting the sort of sounds and choices that he used. It wouldn't have been things that I would have necessarily gone to, but now I think I should maybe have to start thinking a bit more like that. In the last section of the video, he started going over some of his very nice, extensive instrument collection. I assume they were his rather than the studio, because I'm not sure if the studio that he was in, it was the one where he recorded with Amy Winehouse. I'm not sure if he still owns that studio or whether he ever did own it, but he sort of shows you what a Rhodes sounds like, a Whirly sounds like, and he's got these amazing sort of vintage effects pedals, and then he shows us some guitar with these different amps from guys that he's heard and he likes. Again, not the kind of sound that I would be going for, but I can see why he likes the sound. Then he shows some acoustic guitar stuff, some nylon string stuff, then some synth stuff, all really interesting. I learned loads. I mean, I thought I knew quite a lot about this kind of thing, but I learned a lot from it. So in conclusion, I would say this was a really interesting course, and like these other Maestro courses that I've watched, they're not kind of going into specifics like the graphic design one wasn't, oh, this is how you do this in Photoshop. It's more a kind of process thing, a concept about, you know, the graphic design one was, this is what the client wanted, this is where the back and forth, this is how we ended up agreed on this is how this design functions. And this music thing, it wasn't sort of saying, he wasn't giving you tips on how to use Pro Tools, but then he would say, this is how I set up my session to make the workflow easier. It's the kind of process, it's all about that, and just that fly on the wall thing, showing that session, really, really useful. And as I said, this isn't the way that I would normally necessarily approach production, although there's little bits that I have used, but it's kind of inspired me to do that. And any different approach when you're creating something can give you new ideas and inspire you to come up with different things if you approach things from different directions. So I'm really glad I watched it, and I've come out of it not being skeptical any longer about this producer artist thing, because having watched what he does, and as I keep saying, he's no great musician, and these, you know, he's laying down a 4-bar chord sequence, which is what a lot of modern pop music is. So, you know, he's not creating Bohemian Rhapsody here, but he's creating this kind of sound and vibe, and creating this atmosphere and this platform for the artist to go away and just be free to create. And then he's capturing those good bits, and then between them they're putting it all together. And without him, this wouldn't have happened. He's got a lot more musical input than I would sort of traditionally thought of a record producer. Now, having read Ted Templeman's autobiography, his kind of thing is to stop the band arguing, make sure they turn up to the session, make sure they come up with something that means that his big boss isn't going to be annoyed, all that kind of thing, but not really a musical input, whereas Mark's completely intrinsic to the musical output of these sessions. And just his kind of approach to these little hooks and ideas that are in the production, which is what's made his records so good and so popular. And he can be funny as well, because you sort of think he's sort of talking slightly monotone, but that's just his manner. He's just laid back, and it was interesting seeing that dynamic, because he's so laid back and calm. It makes him perfect for that producer role, while the artist is leaping around all over the place. He's the kind of calming influence to that in the session. So I would say, if you're interested, go and watch this if it's on offer. There's other courses, and I think I'm going to do a review on the one I'm watching at the moment, which I'm not going to tell you what that is till I've finished watching it, but I'm really finding that interesting as well. It's opened my eyes to lots of new ideas when I'm producing my own music, to give me ideas for writing my own music as well, and co-writing, and also I do end up in the producer's chair sometimes, so it's going to give me a more of a, not so much the techniques of what he's doing, because it's not necessarily the kind of thing that I've been producing, but you know, to create that kind of atmosphere for someone to be creative in. I think that's really useful. So check it out, BBC Maestro. Go and have a look if they've got it on offer. I think they seem to be adding courses and stuff, and I keep getting emails saying review this, review that, so they're obviously still, it's an active thing. I think it's been around for about 4 or 5 years, so this, I'm a bit late to the party on this one, but definitely worth watching. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll bring out new videos 7 PM UK time every Friday, so hope to see you next week.